What year were you born?
I was born in the 2000.
Okay. Were you born in Taiwan?
I was, yeah. I was born in the city of Zhongli, or I guess now they changed the name to just Taoyuan, but it's in the same district.
Okay.
So that's kind of where I came from, yeah.
Okay. What is the earliest memory that you have of your childhood?
Um, Earliest memory I would say would be I just remember growing up like getting sick a lot. So I think like my first like initial memory would be like when the times I spent in hospitals because I do often visit the hospitals a lot. Just remember visiting doctors and I don't know, getting my medicine and things like that, and then having to spend a majority of my time when I was young, like in like the hospital bed. But yeah,
Okay. Compared to the US, what was the hospitality like there?
um, I think the healthcare system in Taiwan is a little bit more accessible. It's also more affordable. Granted that we don't get as good of a care there versus here in terms of like how like developed and advanced like medicine is in Taiwan. But I think overall it's just more accessible and affordable in that people are born with like insurance. So then like granted they still have to pay, but not a whole lot. And then like the name that we use in Taiwan is called Jianbao, but it's kind of like it's sort of like Medicaid, where like it's like state sponsored insurance, but but like for the whole Taiwan essentially.
Okay.
So yeah, it made everything a lot easier from like hospitalization to just getting the care that you need and things like that. So
Okay, I see. So, growing up, what kind of neighborhoods did you come up in?
yeah, so I grew up in Taoyuan, so that's like more like upper middle class kind of area. So kids in my area, they're generally pretty well off, I yeah, it's more like a more affluent part of Taiwan, so you don't see too much of like homelessness. Granted that there are still beggars along the streets, and like the kids there are generally pretty competitive in that like parents are able to afford them to go to like after school classes or things of that sort. So in terms of like I don't know, education wise, like I would say and actually kind of interesting in that like it felt more competitive in Taiwan for sure than the US.
Okay.
I just thought that yeah, in Taiwan like education is almost like everything, like in terms of like what grade you get on your card and on your report cards, and like how that defines you as a person. Like everything in Taiwan is just so academically driven that kids in my neighborhood are just yeah, like they're a whole different breed. They're just like studying all the time. So
That's it.
yeah.
Okay, and growing up, what kind of values did your parents instill in you?
Mhm. So growing up, I think my parents wanted me to be as accomplished of a person that I could be, whether that be academically or like in other aspects of life or other areas of life. So in terms of just school alone, I remember having to go to like English classes like on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then I will go to math classes on Mondays and Wednesdays, and these are all like outside of just like regular school.
Yeah, yes.
And then after like actual school, I will go to like another like sort of like a reinforcement class. It's like the equivalent of like elite or like
That's it,
I don't
yes.
know, things like that. Yeah, in the US. So I just remember, yeah, leaving like house really early in the morning, like 7 to get to school, but then like coming back home really late after all the after school
Okay,
classes,
yeah.
like around
Long
10.
day every day.
Yeah, and that's like, when I was like 7, 8, 9, or 10, so it's like really competitive there for some reason. Um, and and then in terms of like other areas of life, like my parents want me to make sure I'm well-rounded. So like I took like ping pong like club when I was in school, and then they wanted me to get really good at it. So then I played it for like a couple years, and then played for the school a little bit. But yeah, like I guess parents, my parents at least specifically wanted me to be like a very well-rounded, very successful person who just strives for excellence in every like regard basically. So then they would tell me to like try to go above and beyond and try to earn like in my elementary school they gave like like awards and certificates for like things you accomplish in school, including like how many books you read or like how well you perform in class and things like that. And then they would tell me to collect as many of those certificates or trophies as possible. So that's kind of like how I grew up and what my parents told me. Yeah.
Okay, so after a long day of school, what would a normal conversation at the dinner table consist of?
It's kind of sad. Um, I didn't really grow up eating like all together with my family. And actually in Taiwan, my dinner time would be spent on the bus, like on the way to like an after school class.
Yeah, yeah.
So after I get off school, I will go to like the reinforcement classes. And then oftentimes after reinforcement classes, I will then be on my way to go to like, the math classes or the English classes I was talking about earlier. And so that will cut right into dinner time. So then before class, I would just, eat like packed like dinner from my parents on the bus, on the way to like those places. So I didn't really grow up, you know, eating like with family members per se. It's kind of like contrary to belief, like Chinese people or like Taiwanese people, they eat together at a dining, like sit down all together at a dinner table. But I actually spent most of my days eating like on the car rides, and then because like I get tired by the end of the day after eating, I just take a nap. So that's usually how my day goes. Yeah.
Okay, so countering on that, what was your favorite food when it was so if you did have someone prepare something for you, what would your favorite meal be? And
Yeah. I actually grew up really liking my mom's 番茄炒蛋, which is like tomato fried eggs. It's like a dish that it's really simple to make, but to me it just reminds me a lot of home. I think it's something that like my mom made all the time when she's available and she's home. And like something that she would like made to like cheer me up from like a bad day. Um, so honestly, if she makes something along those lines, then yeah, it'll be a good day. Yeah.
okay, so what did your family do for a living?
hmm so my parents, they kind of switched jobs around. So before they were in Taiwan, they were in Burma. So actually they immigrated from Burma to Taiwan. And I was raised by a single mom actually. So my mom, when she was at Burma, she was like a shop owner, like Goodwill or like a Dollar Tree store where like she kind of just sells things. So she went from that, and then when she moved to Taiwan, she worked at this like electronics store, I guess, like more like a factory actually, because she worked in the along the lines of like assembly line. So she worked there for a couple of years. My uncle, he was the nighttime manager for a hotel. Uh, I think a pretty famous one. I think it's called like 老爷大酒店 or something, but I think it's located in somewhere in Taoyuan as well, or Taipei. I don't know. I don't remember, but so that's what my family did to like get the income. But then when we immigrated to US, I think they kind of stuck with what they did in Taiwan. My mom works at Penumbra, which is a medical device assembly company. So she continued on with the role of being an assembler, working at assembly line, and then my uncle kept working at Marriott Hotel. So then he continued his career in hotel industry. So and actually interesting fact that my mom and my uncle actually both also went to Japan for a period of time to also work there and to live there for a couple of years. So they both work at like restaurant industry as well. So it kind of goes hand in hand with what they're doing, sort of. Yeah. So
Can
yeah.
you touch on what your relationship was like with your uncle and your mom?
Yeah. So my mom, she um she's always like working multiple jobs. So in Taiwan, she's working she was actually working two jobs. In the morning, she will work at, the assembly line job, but then at night, she will work at a 水煎包 like dian, which is like a very popular like small like snack dish thing in Taiwan where they would just make it's kind of like just making like it's like dim sum, but like not dim sum. It's like a very specific type of dish in Taiwan where it's very ubiquitous in like night markets and things like that. She will man one of these stands at night and then just kind of make a bunch of 水煎包 for like customers that come to eat at her stand. So because of that, I didn't really get to spend that much time with my mom. Because when she's out there working, I'm actually spending most of my daytime hour and actually nighttime hour also in school.
Mm,
So then it's my uncle who I actually get to spend a lot more time with because he works night shifts. So then he's available during the day to kind of take care of me in the morning. But then also because he works like later in the night, that he also gets to pick me up and drop me off to like the different places and schools that I need to be at. And then it's also because of that I get to have more conversations with him. So my relationship with my mom growing up wasn't the closest, I would say, just because like our schedule just didn't really line up, didn't really work out. Um, but I think even then, like, my mom still cares for me and still loves me. So then, like, it's not like just because we're busy that like we're not close. We still try to like, put in some hours of like conversations here and there. Because by the end of the day, like, she still gets the opportunity to like pick me up from school after like a long day of like just being at like a reinforcement classes or whatever. So yeah. um so even though we're not the closest growing up, but then like we still try to talk to each other as much as we could. So yeah.
okay, so do you have any siblings? And if so, what role did they play in your life growing up?
No, I actually don't have any siblings. So, but interesting though is that it felt like as though I grew up with siblings. So I have two other cousins in Taiwan, and um I just remember we grew up like playing a lot with each other, like we were basically playmates. And both of them they're brothers to each other. So then relative to those two, I'm like the middle person. And it actually felt like I was the middle child this whole like growing up because I just remember them getting into fight a lot, and then I would be like the one to kind of intervene and kind of like be that like third person in their relationship. But it felt like as though like I had this opportunity to kind of like I don't know, like they weren't necessarily like the best influence technically, to be frank. They yeah, they didn't like school. They didn't really like, you know, doing anything academically per se. They just like to play a lot. Um, but I just remember for me personally, I was actually an influence on them actually, because because their parents are my mom's, or their mom is my mom's sister. So then oftentimes my aunt would tell my two cousins to kind of look up to me, I guess, in terms of like trying to like get things done in terms of like academically wise. So then in that sense, we would like try to, even though we play a lot, we try to study together as well. So like from that, I was sort of an influence on them in that I helped them to kind of want to, I don't know, just try harder in school, I guess, or to take school a little bit more seriously. So even though, yeah, we didn't really grow up together like, actual siblings, but I think through our times together and how much time we spend with one another, it felt as though we are siblings and that I get to be that sort of influence on them. Yeah.
You guys all receive the same education and attend the same school growing up?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, they're from a different city, so they went to a different primary school, but then we all went to the same like after school classes too. So the math class is called MPM 数学, which is like MPM math, but we went to that same math course. We also went to this English international like bilingual language kind of class called HESS, HESS. So in terms of education wise, we all received basically the same thing growing up, even though the primary school is a little different. Yeah.
So you talked about being a little bit younger, but what was a normal day for you at, say, the age of 12 to 15?
12 to 15. So I moved to the US when I was 10. So by the time it was 12 to 15, I was already in the US. And from US, I'm from Fremont, California, so the Bay Area. So moving to United States, it didn't feel that big of a change other than the fact that people started to speak more English than I'm used to. It actually came to me as a surprise that like, not it didn't feel like much has changed other than the fact like streets look different and then like, air feels cleaner and houses look bigger. A lot of people that I hung out with, they're all Asian still. So then it didn't feel like, I was with like that I was like sort of an outsider. But then, that language barrier still posed like a challenge for me personally to kind of connect and relate with my classmates. But in terms of like how I lived my life in the US around 12 to 15, I think it was a lot more like chill. I think I just remember not having to do as many like after school classes that I needed to in Taiwan. And then I was still able to like kind of cruise by school pretty well. And schools in US, I just felt like it was a lot more like it felt slower paced in Taiwan and less like competitive for sure. Because in Taiwan, like everyone knows how each other are doing in terms of like grade wise, because by the end of our so we would take like midterms actually in Taiwan as an elementary kid, which is kind of crazy. So we would do midterms, and then by the end of the midterm, it's not just like one midterm too, it's like multiple midterms for different like subjects. So then you would see like how everyone's doing in terms of class standing wise. So then they have, they assigned each person a number, so kind of like roll call number, but then they publicize and like attach the score to your number. So then if you know each other's numbers, you know how well people did in the class, and then they kind of rank it from like top to bottom. So then there's that sense of like awareness and sort of the motivation, I guess, to push forward. But then because of that, the environment in Taiwan was very competitive. But then in America, like grades are very like a private thing. Like it's your grade, you don't really publicize it. So then it felt more like a collaborative environment rather than a competitive one in Taiwan. So yeah, so when I was in US taking like elementary, or I guess 12, I'm already in junior high to high school, but it just felt like, yeah, things were not as crazy and not as fast paced. And definitely grades are not as cutthroat as the way it is structured in Taiwan. So yeah.
When you did have some downtime as a child in Taiwan, what were your favorite places to go?
Yeah. Downtime, I played a lot with my neighbors, with my neighborhood friends. There would be this like, it's really silly looking back, but there's like this construction site slash like open field that like people don't really use. So then we would like ride our bikes around, and then we would like play some really dumb games looking back. Like we would throw rocks at each other as like an activity for like a whole afternoon. No one got seriously injured obviously, but looking back it's kind of silly. um uh i I remember in those reinforcement classes and classes that I did go during the summer, when we have downtime from like doing all the work, we would like play our toys. So we would bring our toys to like these places. And I remember back in the time, the most popular toys were like Beyblades, like Hot Wheels, but like not Hot Wheels. It's like a Chinese version or a Taiwanese version of like Hot Wheels, I guess. Um, we play like tag on the courts and things like that. So it in terms of recreation time, it's not that much more different than like recreation time in like US. I think you have just about the same level of fun, um, but it's just that you um, don't get as much freedom, I would say, as the what you can do when what you choose to do with your free time in US versus Taiwan. Because I think free time is hard to come by in Taiwan for sure. So then you don't want to spend it doing something like that invests too much, I guess. Whereas in the US, you can like, you know, go out, travel with friends and things like that. But in Taiwan, you can't afford to do too much of that, I would say. So, you like granted you can still, watch movies, things like that, whatever, but then definitely not as much as like binging on a whole season of like Netflix, like I don't know, Doctor Who or like Grey's Anatomy. So yeah, you just have to be really careful about how you choose to spend your free time. Fun is allowed, but in Taiwan, it's like not too much to like a moderate level, I would say. Yeah.
Okay, so you talked about your childhood friends. Do you still keep in touch with those friends, or is there a disconnect?
Yeah, I would say there is a bit of a disconnect ever since I moved here. So I actually went back a couple times in between, like when I immigrated Taiwan when I was 10 to now. But I do try to connect with them like for during the times that I do go back. But then when I am in the United States, due to time difference, I think it's hard to connect. We're behind in terms of time, and then also like the busyness of life kind of caught on. In here, I'm doing my own thing, and then back in Taiwan, they're doing like their own thing. So it just felt like schedule wise, it didn't really quite work out in terms of like how to stay connected and things like that. Um, but yeah, I would try to visit them whenever I head back and visit Taiwan. So
Do they still live local to where they were, or most of them have they moved or no?
yeah, so a lot of them are now attending college as well. So because of that, they actually moved to wherever they are.
Mm.
But when I visit during the holidays, they will go back. So it works out. Like thankfully. Yeah, um but yeah, most of them moved because of college by now.
Okay, so what is one of your favorite memories while growing up?
Favorite memories. Um Man, I would say going to night markets. I think going to night markets is one of the most precious moments I get to spend with, my friends, even family members. And it's such a unique experience that I don't really know where else you can get. I mean, in the United States, I been to like 626 markets in LA, but I just feel like it's not the same. It's not the same in a sense. And there's this strangely a sense of um like closeness and sort of familiarity with like the food and like kind of how people are so interconnected with one another in terms of like culture. Like even just like having to bump shoulders with a bunch of people because like the streets are so narrow and then you're trying to get to like a certain food stand. Like even that experience alone just feels like it's something that is irreplaceable. And it's something that is very unique to like Taiwan, I feel like. And yeah, I just remember loving to go to night markets, and the food there is cheap, it's delicious, and you just get so much fun. I think just by spending a whole night at night market. It's such a great bonding experience with anyone that you're you know bringing with you to Taiwan. So I would say visiting night markets is probably my fondest memories in Taiwan for sure.
Can you describe a particularly worrisome or challenging experience from your childhood?
Yeah. Um, challenging experience. I think the most challenging part about being a student in Taiwan, like this is going back to like the topic of like education again. I just feel like there's not much um like room to forgive for mistakes. There's so in Taiwan, how you like even like deciding which high school you go to, in the US, it depends on where you live, right? It depends on region. But then in Taiwan, it depends on your test scores. So even at high school, you're told to like take this exam called Gaokao, which is like Gaozhong. Gaozhong means high school. So then Gaokao is like high school examination. And then based on your score, you're placed in wherever high school you're going. And then depending on which high school you're going, then you have to take like Duankao or something like that, where like you take another examination to go to college. But then where you end up in high school has a lot of influence on where you're gonna be in college. And we take things like SAT, ACT all the time. Well, since COVID, I think that might have changed, but like ACT, if you don't like your score, you take it again. You take it as many times as you want. But these tests are different. These tests are one shot. You only get one chance. If you bomb it, you bomb it for the rest of your life. And I think in that sense, it's very unforgiving and no, it puts a lot of stress, it puts a lot of strain on like students' mental health. I think you know it depends on where you live too, like whether or not your parents are socioeconomically like stable, like whether they can afford you to take like classes like elite equivalent after like school. Like I think all that weighs in a lot on like how you turn out as a person in Taiwan, which like looking back, I really don't like how Taiwan is like that. And it's kind of unfortunate to see many students like feeling very like anxious and almost like on the verge of like, you know, like having some mental breakdown because of it. Um, like thankfully for me in Taiwan, like I've only lived there for 10 years, so I've only went up to like fourth grade in Taiwan, so I didn't really had to experience much of that like stress. But I've had like yeah family members, like just other cousins that kind of went through similar issue, and just seeing kind of like how they turned out like made me really think twice about like whether or not like education in Taiwan is one that they really want to subject the students to. I guess it's just too rigorous, too unforgiving. But maybe things changed. It's been like 11 years since I moved out of Taiwan, so maybe things are different now. But at least back in the days, like it was just yeah too much on a student. So
When you grew up, what kind of life and profession did you imagine having as a grown up?
yeah, so that's a very exciting topic um because actually where I'm going and headed now is very much aligned in line with like what I had envisioned when I was in Taiwan.
It's wonderful.
So back in Taiwan, yeah, so I thought about becoming a doctor. I mean, granted, my family also pushed that mentality on me, but yeah, I just remember wanting to pursue a career in healthcare, and then ever since like when I was young, I tried to be this student that's like diligent, studious, and like basically trying to get myself to be there. And then now moving to into US, I continue on with that vision, but then it became more like focused in that like I now figured out that I want to be a pharmacist. So actually this coming summer, summer of 2021, I'll be attending UCSF and their pharmacy program. So I'm really excited about that.
Congratulations.
But yeah, I'll be attending their school and being a PharmD candidate. So um, so yeah, it's really interesting how like my vision and when I was a kid kind of carried out, and then now realizing that dream. So really excited for these coming few years.
And so you talked about the job aspect of dreaming. but as in terms of like growing up with a family or living in a house, do you have any plans for that, or has that changed since when you were younger? Did you say, "Oh, I wanted to live in this type of house," and then once you got out here, it changed your opinion, or has it always been kind of steady and have the same goal?
Yeah, let's see. In Taiwan, we lived in this house, all to ourselves. It's a pretty big house. I think my parents wanted to kind of live in a similar house where it's like, a single family, a single house where, you get like a bunch of rooms, a bunch of bathrooms or whatever. Um, and then I think coming to US was a sacrifice because they gave up their work, they gave up like their income, they gave up the house so that we lived in so now in US we live in this small like condominium where it's just like, very simple, two rooms, two bathrooms. It's like around 800 square feet, so it's like not that big. You share the building with some other people. So I think for them initially it's a bit of a contrast, something that they're not used to. And then so for them, like their highest vision and goal for me was to kind of like work, in the future and to be able to afford like a single house where they can live comfortably. Um, for me personally, like I don't really have a preference in like where I want to live and where I want to be. Yeah, because actually, when it comes to like family, house, and things like that, I think I kind of see it as um wherever like God wants me to be. So as a Christian, like I kind of have this understanding that, oh, like wherever I can be to be a good witness to like the people, to be able to share the gospel. Like I think that's kind of like where I'm seeing in terms of like where I want to be. I don't really have like a particular like, place or location in mind. Just knowing that like, yeah, um, wherever like God leads me, that's kind of where I'll be. I know that's kind of like different from what my parents' visions had for me, but I think for me personally, like I don't really have any preference in terms of like where I want to live or what kind of house I want to live at. So
Okay.
yeah.
Did religion play a pivotal role in your growing up years?
So interestingly, my family grew up believing in Buddhism. I personally didn't believe in Buddhism. I kind of just went along with the practices out of respect for my grandma and my parents. Um, so religion wasn't really something that I picked up until college when I thought about like different things in life. So it was until college that I actually decided to look into Christianity and kind of seeing it as a professing faith of mine. It was something that I kind of dug some studying into just out of pure interest, and then eventually I realized a couple of things about what Christianity has to offer, and sort of kind of um, decided to stick with it because I believe many of the things that I looked into were true. So I would say growing up, religion didn't play an impact at all. However, things changed when I started to look into religion in college. And it was at college that I started to kind of think about my future a little bit differently with different, lens. So I would say growing up, no. College, yeah.
Okay, so how have things changed in Taiwan since you lived there as a child? Are there any glaring differences now?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest differences is industrialization. I think 11 years, like that's, a long time, but it's also a very short time if you look at it at how much Taiwan has advanced. I think I remember going back sophomore year winter break, like I was just looking at like my old streets. I was like, wow, is this where I used to live? Like the streets, the roads are like so much bigger and wider. They're now connected to like main streets where it's very happening. There's a lot of traffic. But where I used to live like 11 years ago, like I lived in this small street that's not really connected to any main intersections. So then it's kind of like a nice quiet place. But then because like how they advanced the roads and how they connected everything, like my street became a very happening street, became a very like I don't want to say loud, but it's kind of loud with all the cars moving in about. But yeah, just that, and then a bunch of buildings came up, a bunch of new, like, taller and bigger buildings are now in place. So kind of relating back to like that empty field I was talking about, like that place has become now like a whole new like residential area. So that's kind of like where I am, where I would say is the biggest difference.
Okay. What kind of feelings and words come to mind when you remember your childhood in Taiwan?
Ooh, words and feelings. I would say busy. I would say um tiring, very, very tiring. Um very, I don't know, I guess I maybe even like automatic, I would say. Like life was in Taiwan was such like it felt like I was living according to like a rhythm.
Hmm.
Like things were very automatic. Like 7 a.m. boom, wake up from bed, breakfast, school, and then all right, next, and then arriving to school, ping pong club real quick for like an hour, and then back to school for the actual classes. After actual classes, you're moving into the reinforcement classes that I was talking earlier, like the or whatever. And then after that, you're on your way en route, on the bus to go to like English classes or math classes. And then after all that, you come home and then it's sleep time. Like
Hmm.
it just felt very like it felt rigid, like the schedule is very rigid. I just kind of have to follow it. And then as long as I follow it, then I know that like I'm doing well in life, I guess. So I didn't really think about like any other things. Like I didn't think much about it either, just kind of going along with the schedule and kind of just keeping up with the pace at which life is moving. So yeah, fast pace would be another word I would describe it. Um, it was, yeah, it was just so automatic and so like, it almost felt mundane, I guess, but yeah, like you're just kind of going through the motions of life and you're not really thinking much. Yeah.
If you could tell your 10-year-old self one thing, what would it be?
My 10-year-old self, I would tell him, hey, it's okay to make some mistakes along the way. I think when I was 10 or even just like a few years like younger, I always beat myself up for any like failures that I've kind of encountered. Whether that be like, you know, not doing as well or better than some of my other classmates, maybe that would be like not, playing my best at those ping pong matches. Um, yeah, I just remember like failure was a very hard word to take. If I was not like getting a certificate, like it felt like a blow to my ego at the time. But then throughout, my time here in US, I've come to experience way more failure than I've actually experienced in Taiwan for sure. And it was a very humbling experience. It was a very self-revealing and experience where I come to learn a lot about myself. And then it was through those failures that I learned how to improve as a person and how to um, become better and become someone who's more mature. And I think just embracing that and understanding that like there's gonna be like mistakes happening along the way, but still like how we get up from our mistakes and recover and kind of move forward, that really matters the most. And to me at the time when I was 10, not something that I could grasp, the idea that like failures are okay and then that it's what matters the most is like picking it back up and kind of moving forward and just kind of recover from your mistakes. And then yeah, it's through that I kind of went through a lot of self-improvement and learned how to be a better, a more mature version than I was, the day before. So I would tell myself like, yeah, just be okay with mistakes and then just move forward with that.